Welcome to Wire Guild. This tutorial I have named the fan, and it's a woven and wrapped pendant tutorial. And you can see it looks a little bit like a fan. It's kind of sweet, it's sort of almost Egyptianish, maybe Native Americanish. Anyway, you're going to need 17 pieces of approximately 6 inch or 15 centimeters of 20 gauge or 0.8 round wire. Now you can use a thicker gauge wire if you want, and you get a larger pendant, and I will show you one that I did in a thicker gauge later on. I used 26 gauge for the weaving, but thicker or finer up to you. Some half round for binding. Again, whatever you've got handy will do for this one. Now I use 15 crimp beads and 8 6mm beads, but wait till you get to that part of the tutorial and see what you think you'd like to use. So again, I'm using 17 lengths of wire, and they're all approximately 6 inches long, but if you want to make this bigger, by all means use more. The fiddly bit is getting it onto, we're going to put it onto like a mount. So I'm just straightening my bits of wire out and trying to wriggle them so they're flat, and I'm going to bend them at about 2 inch. Now if you don't want to do this all at once, you don't want to risk doing this all at once, do them in sections or do them one at a time. But as long as you've got a general bend in there, there we go, I can just neaten them up, sort of a few at a time, just going, well I could if they didn't crisscross. They do need to be flat because otherwise your pliers won't sort of grip down onto them. And I don't need a particularly sharp bend, but I do need a nice corner there. Now don't worry if they're not all absolutely the same, or they're not exact, or one was slightly out of place and it's, you know, 1/8 of an inch shorter than the others. That we can manage. Now if you've done one and it's massively out, straighten it up and rebend it so that you've got it in the right place. So I'm just bending all these. Now I know you might be thinking, how on earth am I going to hold 17 bits of wire in my hand? Well, it's not impossible. I won't say it's impossible because I have done it without, but I'm going to show you a way of holding all these together so that we can work with them, whether you've got spare hands lying around or not, because sometimes you feel like you ought to have 3 hands. I'm going to use it's a marker pen. It's just a thick marker pen, and the bottom's probably about 1/2 inch, 1.5 centimeters ish. Lipstick tube would do, top of a small bottle would do, anything that's sort of little and roundish. Now that's shiny, so if I just stick some masking tape on that end, it will stop it being quite so slippy, so that when I get to putting the wire against it, it's not going to sort of whiz around in circles and get annoying. So now I need another piece of masking tape, and I'm going to try and put that there with the pliers over the top of it to see if they'll hold it, because normally I would do this in my hands, but with trying to do it for the camera, it's sometimes easier if you've got something that works like another pair of hands. This is going to be laid around there like that. So the short end is going down the length of the pen and the longer end is sticking out. So I'm just going to stick this onto the sticky tape like that, and then do the next one, and they're going to be pretty much side by side of these. Don't bother trying to leave a gap. Yeah, you see, it's not going to hold it, is it? I'll just try and sit it there. Maybe the weight of the wire will hold it down now. And I'm going to stick all 17 of these to my little piece of masking tape. I'm now desperately trying to think whether they call masking tape the same thing all over the world, and I'm not sure. It's like a low tack tape, it's not too sticky, so you don't need to see me stick 17 of these on, so I just speeded it up a bit so you get the general gist. If you're doing it in your fingers, you can actually drop these wires downwards, which is a little easier, but I haven't got enough room So these are stuck to my sticky tape now, and I can pull my tape up and wrap that over the top of the tape that I already put on the pen and wrap that round. Now I want all these bits of wire now so that they're sticking out, so it's like an explosion or a big starburst, and I'm just going to push them down so that they're all nice and even with the bottom of the pen. It moves quite easily with the low tack tape, says she, and that one wasn't moving at all. There we go. And then you can just sort of press them into where they need to be. So I'm just going to whiz you past this bit. So there we go. These do not want to press down. Of course, I tell you it's easy because it's low tack tape, and then I've got the stickiest low tack tape in the history of man, and nope, not even pressing it against a flat surface is going to make it move. So if you happen to have super glue on your low tack tape, I'm going to need to undo it and move them. So let's just unstick that. See, these things happen. You don't worry about it. Now then, where's the other end? Oops. No, I've taken too much there. I've taken the bit that was covering the pen as well. There we go. Now let me just give those a shove. Now, right, okay, lift them off. And as I lift them off, I can edge them down and then just stick them back onto the tape again. So I'm going to whiz through it. It's going to take me a while. I'll probably end up using pliers and to pull them off and push them back down. Maybe if I'd taken a little bit more time and got them neat right at the beginning, I wouldn't have had to do that. But you can learn by my mistakes. Right, so let's stick that round there and bring the other side round and stick it down. Alright, now that may seem like a right palaver, or a palaver, that might be another one of those words that you don't use. Anyway, a waste of time, but it isn't. It's, once you've got it on, it does make life a lot easier for you. Now, I've got some binding wire here, copper binding wire, but I have run out of 0.4, so this is 0.5, and I think, yeah, it's going to be too thick. Let me just wind it. Yeah, it is, you know, it's the problem with using it, and using a 0.5 like this, you can get away with if you're using 1mm wire, but on 0.8 wire, no, it's not good at all. So I'll pop that on one side, and we won't be using that. What else have I got? We'll use silver. That will do. It'll make a difference. But again, it's the right thickness, so if you want to use a finer one than I'm using, if you want to go down to 0.3, which I think is 28 gauge in 20 instead of 26, absolutely fine. So I'm just starting it on one of the ends, and I'm wrapping round sort of 3 or 4 times just to give it a good firm anchor point, and I'm going to slide this all the way down. And then I am going to go under to the next piece of wire, and then all the way around it, and then under to the next piece of wire, and all the way around. So I'm making like a loop around every single piece of wire. So just in that one, all the way around. What you're making sure is that you don't get them out of order. If you do, you have to take it off and redo it. And around there, and that one. Now I'm going to go around every one of these all the way across, if they'll stay separate, and push that down. Now you can imagine what this would have been like if you'd have been trying to hold 17 pieces of wire in your hand and weave them together. Like I say, it's possible and you can do it, but for several reasons using the pen makes it so much easier. It holds the wires in place for you while you're weaving in and out. But not only that, as you weave in between like this and you get them tight, they will hold at a certain angle to the pen, so they'll give you an even try to think of the right words here, an even splay, so even gaps between every single one of the wires, so even angles. You tend to think, well, maybe it doesn't really matter, it's, after all, it's an organic thing. But it's strange when you're doing something that's got strong bold lines like this one has, long straight lines, even though we put curved lines over the top, you get a couple that are really close together, maybe one that's more straight than angled. Just push those up, sorry. I want those as close to the top as I can get, so I'm still doing the same thing. Up between the wires, all the way around the piece, back down. If I can get through the right gap there, sorry. Back down, and then up and round the next one. If you get two that are close together and then two that are further apart, it jars. It's one of those things that you see and the eye runs straight to and goes like, you know, that's not quite right. So although it's a pain using the sticky tape and getting it on, it really does make life a lot easier. Okay, now I'm going to go around the end one. As you can see, you can hardly see anything, but I've gone all the way around those and it's starting to hold it. So I'm now going to weave just in and out, so up and down. Can you see my left hand is holding the wire as close as I can get it to the top? That's it. Have I gone through the right ones there? Not there. And up and hold it tight. Back down, push it in as far as it will go. That's it. And then back up. So I'm not wrapping around any of the wires now. We only did that on the first one. That was just to give us some extra strength on that first row. From here on we can just weave up and down and up and down. Another reason why we've got an odd number of wires, we've got 17, is that when we go on our way back it will be the opposite way, so you'll get a proper, like a basket work weave. Now there's no point in you sitting there and watching me go each one, so I've just speeded this up just a little bit, but I'm just up and down in between these and pushing the wires down every time. So there's my first row, and the wire that I wrapped around to anchor is being really awkward and getting in the way, so I'm going to pull that out of the way. Let's see, and then just pull these down. You'll see that as you pull the wire down and get it right in there at the bottom, your wires splay and spread out. It's like opening your fingers right out because there's something thick in there. They've got to open, they can't do anything else. So there we go around that one. Now just making sure that they're even and that they're straight. I will wrap round the end wire just a couple of times, and then I will start and work my way under and over, under and over. You'll soon know if you've got the wrong under or over, because you'll see that you're following the same line instead of getting the opposite of the one that you got the time before. So I've gone all the way back to the other end now, so they need pushing in just a little bit further. But as you can see, I'm going to keep weaving now until I've gone quite a distance. Now I'll try to think, how many rows have I got on here? Let's have a look. Probably about 8 or so backwards and forwards rows. But just keep going until you feel happy with it. You know, until you've got a nice space. So at this point I am going to use some crimp beads. I love crimp beads. They're really cheap. You can buy them, you know, you buy the packets of the 100. They're a lot cheaper than getting, I think they call them Belishi beads or something, that's your little tubes, and they're always a lot dearer. And crimp beads work great. So these are silver ones, and I'm just sliding them over the copper wire, and it gives it, it looks like you somehow managed to change your wire midway from copper to silver, which is, it's another attraction for the eye. Now if you didn't want to use little crimp beads, or you haven't got any crimp beads, you could use a small, will this go on? These are tiny little chip-ins, and nah, no, it won't go on. What else have I got? You know, little silver beads, or this is a little carnelian bead, and as you can see that drops in there quite nicely, but you'd have to do it every other one. You couldn't put them on every one, you could do them every other, but it would give a nice row of design or difference to go along there. So this is a case of using your imagination. You know, what have you got, what could you use in there? You could do some little bits of spring, you know, from your coiling gizmo, and put those on if you wanted. They'd look really cool on. But I'm just filling each one with, now you may have noticed I haven't done the end wires, I've only done the ones in the middle, so there's 15 of these little crimp beads. Now do you remember the stitch we did right at the very top, where I came round underneath and then came up and did a full loop around the wire? I'm going to do that again. That's going to give us more strength underneath the bead and hold the bead in place to make sure that it doesn't drop off. But it's giving more body to the piece. So all the way along, so underneath, up, round the single wire, then all the way to the next wire, come up, down, round, on, up, down, round, all the way across. And you'll already be able to see how much easier this is getting for me, because I can go in between the wires now so much easier, because they're all starting to get really, really firm. Let's just whiz past that bit as I go on. Okay, so I've got my little crimp beads in, and I can just splay those out a bit. Let's have a look. Yeah. Okay, so it's getting us ready for the next bit. I'm going to do some more weaving. You could weave all the way down as far as that and do beads and spaces, and it would be amazing. But I'll probably do it a lot shorter than that, because I'm really, if I start weaving for that length of time, it'll go on forever. Now I weave better from left to right, so you find, because it's on a pen like this, you can flip it over. I don't know why I weave better from left to right, but I do. It's possibly something to do with being right-handed. So if I am able, I will always flip things so that I can work from the left-hand side to the right-hand side. So I turn the whole thing over, and I shall work my way from left to right. And then when I get to the far end, I will flip it back over so that I can work the same way again. Always take the easiest path. If something is easier for you to do one way, do it that way. There is no right or wrong. If something is easier, you're going to feel more comfortable, and therefore your design is going to be more free-flowing. So I flip the whole thing over, and I've come back. Now I've got some beads here. These are 8mm lampwork beads, and I'm just going to slide one on, and this is how we tell what fits. When I slide that bead in between those two wires, just straighten that one up, but you can see that that's not really fitting. To push that down far enough for it to sit in, if I pushed it all the way down, it would distort the wires around it. So that bead is too big. Now I can use a smaller bead. Here we go. This is a 5mm bead, and that one fits in much better. So you have a choice. You can use a smaller bead at this point, or let's have a look at this one. I like these. or you can weave out further and use larger beads. Now the only way to tell, that's fairly close and I think that's going to fit, but I've got a feeling that's a 6mm, not a 5mm bead. So I'm just going to put a bead on every other wire all the way along and see how it fits. Now they're not really sitting in. There's always 2 or 3 try to pop out. That's because really there isn't enough room for them all in there. Okay, I want to use those beads as well, so I'm going to put those back in the box. I'll watch them go everywhere now. There we go. Me and beads, honestly. Ow, stab. So I'm going to do some more weaving, probably just another 2 rows, so under and over weaving all the way along, a couple of times around the end, and then under and over all the way back. Now let's see what the beads look like now. You see they slip in so much easier now. You can see straight off, they're not bouncing out or anything, so they're going to be fine. So I can tie this off. Now if you knew you wanted to make this much bigger and you wanted to put some more weaving on after these beads and then maybe another row of beads, obviously you wouldn't cut your weaving wire off, you'd leave it in place. Then you could work down this side wire and put another row of weaving on. But like I say, if I start making this thing huge, you're going to be sat there watching this video for 2 hours. So I'm going to make it a bit smaller. This is how we finish off at the bottom. I've taken the end wire, I have bent it round the bead, and I am wrapping it to the back. There, can you see how it's going to the back? And it's going to wrap against the wire that's sticking up. There. Now if I bend that wire that way, sorry, hands are in the way, and then I'm going to do the same again on the next wire. So it's bent down, round to the back. There we go. And it's wrapped around the next wire to it. So bend the wire down, wrap in between, and bring it to the... This one doesn't want to bend. You occasionally get patches of wire that are a little harder than the other. So rather than trying to force it and distort all the wires around it, I'll manoeuvre it with a pair of pliers. So I've pulled it out slightly so I can get to it, and then I'll just tighten it. Don't worry about the long end coming around to the front, you can bend that back in a minute. There, like that. So that's now wrapped around the wire, so bend the wire down, like that, and then take that wire around the next one. Now you might be wondering, why have I only put 3 beads on? I put 3 beads on because when I'm doing these on my lap, as opposed to underneath the camera, I throw this thing around all over the place, you know, bending it, tipping it upside down, and if I fill every one of these with beads and then I tip it, they fall all over the floor, and then I have to put everything down, I have to get up and go pick beads up, which I can't bother doing. So I tend to do sort of 2 or 3 at a time. There we go. Can you just see how they've gone in? I'll do the other end now. So let's put a bead on. These are really cool. They're not, I know they look a little bit like turquoise on camera, but they're not. They're like a crackle bead. They're a metallic silver underneath the turquoise coating, and you can just see the lines poking through. So round the wire that's sticking up, bend it down, that's it, round the next wire, because the next wire doesn't have a bead on it, because it's the in-between one, and then come here. Slide that one down, down you go, then round, and you're going down, over the top of the bead, through, and round the wire, and the next one. Now I'm sure you're getting the hang of this now, and it's basically how I'm going to finish off on the pendant all the way along. We will have some wires in the middle which won't have anything on. The central wire and the 2 side wires that we will find something to do, but we'll come to that in a minute. If you're wanting to make this bigger, you can take these ends of wires that we are having left over, if you like, at the moment, and you can bring them and circle them around the front of the beads, give you a bit more design. You could make curls with them. You could, as I always say, it's only your imagination. It's the only limitation is your imagination. So just go in between there and take that down and round and down round the top of that bead and take it round. Okay, I need another bead. It goes on that one. Yeah. Okay, down around the wires. I don't know why, but it reminds me of the stitching on bags. You know when you get like huge sacks of grain, or I know we get feed for the chickens, which the string in the top of the bag is sort of like this. I think it's probably where my mind's picked it up from. Now the last one, I'm just going to take one side and wrap it around that middle wire, and then the one from the other side and wrap it around the middle wire, but I'm not going to go any further than that with it, so I've got those 3 wires there. Now like I say, you could do curls around your beads, you could do twists and twirls and all sorts of things with these ends, but I'm just going to finish them off. So all I'm doing is I'm cutting that right back. I don't know how much in focus that is. Let me see if I can get it a bit closer. And then I'm just going to close, come here, that up, so it's made a little tiny loop around the wire that came out of the top of the bead. So the wire that was to the side of the bead has made a full loop, and I've tightened it down. So I've done it with my fingers, curl round, and that's creating a loop. Trimmed off fairly close, then using pliers, taking that round and press it in, and again down, trim, and pressed it in. I'll tell you what does look really nice on the bottom of these is if you make a loop with the wire before you finish it off, you can then add extra dangles. It's a little bit over the top, but I quite like it. Go on, get down. There, no more sharp bits. Press it in. Yeah, that's it. So, round, trim, and then press it down with the pliers. Okay, now I'm going to do that all the way along and on the other side. Just tighten that loop up. Trying to get different angles so maybe you can see. I must admit, this is one of the ones where it's handy to have me standing at the back of your shoulder with my hands over yours, saying, right, just pull it round, do this, pull it round, do that. But I'm afraid I can't do that, so we'll just have to manage like this. I'm sure you'll get the hang of it. Left that a little bit long, so we'll just trim a little bit more off and press it down. I'm sure you've got the hang of this now, so I'll just speed the next bit up, which is me doing the rest of them. But remember, you've got the 3 wires in the middle that we're not touching yet. So there we are, 3 wires, and all the rest are closed in. and then we can decide later what to do with our 3 wires. Okay, so we have our fan. So it's time to take it off the pen. I'm going to undo the masking tape. Well, I'm going to try and undo the masking tape with virtually no nails. There we go. And then we can just peel it off, and you're left with this sticky up bit. Find the central wire and take that down so it's out of the way. Then take the wire next to it and using your finger curl that around and take it up. Take the next wire from the middle, curl it around and take it up. Don't worry too much about the wires as long as they're sort of laying next door to each other. Next wire. Oops, that's the wrong one. Take it down and curl and back up. They're all getting out of place, but don't worry about that. I'll just give them a squidge together. I can sort them out afterwards. Next wire, down, curl and up. Yeah, they're twisting. Next one. And one at a time you can bring these wires to produce this almost like a little like a collar that's just resting over the neck of the piece, and all the wires are going upwards. Like I said, don't worry too much about them being flat right now, as long as your curl's nice. Yeah. Okay, let's do the other side. So we start in the middle, not the dead middle wire because we bent that out of the way, but the one next to it, and curve it down. Oops, down next to it. Curve round. Can you see how the next one sort of sits over it? And down and lays at the side. So it comes down, it curves, and then it lays to the right of the other wires. Down and over. Sorry, my hand's getting in the way. There we go. Gives you a chance to admire my ring though. My favourite ring. Okay. So we've got our little curve done now. I have mangled the wires on this side. I'll have to straighten those out. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's the way I want it to look. And I'm going to turn this into a little spiral, so there's far too much wire. So if I just trim some of that off and then get round nose pliers. I mean, if you wanted you could add a little bead to this, slide it up, and it would give you a central bead in the middle, which would look quite nice. But I'm just going to put a little spiral in. So that it lays flat. There we go, nice and central. Now these funny sticky up bits, we're going to turn these into our bails. So the way I'm going to do that is I've got some binding wire. I'm not sure what I've got actually here. I think it's 21 gauge, it's quite fine. And I'm going to put a little bend in, flat side inwards, so I've got it upside down. Let's turn it over. There we go. So the domed side is the outside of your bend, and I'm going to go onto the innermost wire. So that's the shortest wire that is near the inner side. This is the first wire that I curled around, and I'm going to wrap around this wire with the binding wire, and I'm going to wrap it around just twice, making sure that the flat face of your binding wire stays inwards. Just tighten that down, and then I'm going to slide it all the way down, as far as it'll go. I'm not tucking it inside that curl, I'm leaving it so that it's visible. Now I'm going to bind the next wire to it. So I'm wrapping around 2 wires now. I'm going to wrap around, and it's going to twist like billy-o because it's round wire, and bring that around and flatten that down with my pliers. Okay, and go around again because I want 2 wraps. That's it. Flatten it down, and then I've got my 2 bindings now. So as I wrap around this time, I'm going to take a 3rd wire in, come here, it's a little bit skew-iffy, so I'm just straightening it up with the pliers. If this is too fiddly or you can't be bothered, you can just wrap straight across and bind all the wires together, or you could use some more of your the fine wire that we did the weaving with, and you could weave in and out and make your bales woven if you wished. But I like this. It's, you know, it's not Egyptian, it's more sort of South American, it's more Aztec. The little steps that this gives up the side, I think, are one of the prettiest things about this pendant. So that's 2 wraps around, so I'm now going to take another wire in, make those lay flat, and make sure they're in. There we go, flatten it down. If you've decided to use 18 gauge, so it's thicker, you may not have enough room for 2 wraps around. You possibly would run out of wire before you got all the way to the top. So you need to make alterations. So I've used 21 and I can do 2 wraps. If you use 18, you may find that you can only bind around once before you have to take that next wire in. But you can juggle this, you know, you can look at it and think, you know, yeah, it's thicker, I need to do, you know, less so that I can get all the way across and get all these wires bound into place before I run out of wire. So I've got the next one. Now right at the beginning I mentioned that I made one with 1mm wire. Obviously it made a much larger pendant, much thicker, heavier pendant. This is a little bit flimsy for my liking, and I will have it tumbling in the rice barrel. Sorry, I just needed to flex my fingers then, so I popped it down. All the way around, go around twice. Yeah, a little bit, probably a couple of hours in the tumbler with some rice and it will firm up, will this. But if you make it in the heavier gauge wire, it doesn't need it. You don't need to tumble it. It can manage as it is. So around there, press it down. Use your pliers. They're there to make your life easier. And you notice I'm always telling you, if it feels easier to do it one way, do it that way. So I always flatten down because it gives me nice, neat bindings. And I'm definitely a sucker for nice, neat bindings. So I'm pushing downwards as well as flat onto the wires. And I've finally got my last wire in now. And press that down. Now then, give it a right good shove. Far down as it'll go. Now then, you can see that the ends of my wire are all over the place, so they're going to have to be evened up. But I think I'm going to put about 4 wraps around here, parallel ones, just to hold everything firm. Again, if you're using 18 gauge, you might be able to get 2 or 3 in, but allow yourself to be guided by what you're actually using. Look at the piece in your hand and see how it's going, how it's progressing, and how many you can put in. You need to have a little bit of bare wire, not bound, showing at the end, because we're going to curl this. And if you grab the bit that you've bound and try and curl it with round nose pliers, all it will do is it'll slip the bindings and they will just move up and over the wire, and we don't want that. So hence the reason we try and have a little bit of bare wire that doesn't have any bare bindings on to grip hold of. Now if I want a straight line across there, the easiest way to do it is get your pliers, go all the way across and squeeze. I aren't saying cut, but if you squeeze, can you see that little tiny line now? Perfectly straight line that I can just snip all the way across, and if the bits of wire are good they drop down, and if they're bad they shoot across the room and smack the kids or the dogs or whatever. Now I'm going to do exactly the same with the other one, except I'm going to have to wriggle those wires about a bit because I mangled them, but it won't take so long. So there we go, I've got my two sides bound, and I'm just going to trim off those starting wires now so they're out of the way and press them down. Okay. Oh, Thunderbird wings, that's what they look like, don't they? You know, the Native American thunderbirds, they have wings that have those little steps on. Right then, so I've still got my 3 wires at the bottom, but I'll do the tops first, mainly because I know what I'm doing with the tops. So round nose pliers, grip on the wire that's not bound. There we go, can you see how I'm gripping there? And twist and ease all the way over until it touches. Lovely. And the same on the other side. Now this pendant I'll put onto leather, but what I won't do is I won't put the leather all the way through, I'll put knots. So I'll use 2 pieces and I'll just have a knot on the inner edge, or even a stitch bead onto the inner edge. Now just give it tweaks, it wasn't quite straight. There we go. Yeah, they're straight. Now then, 3 wires. What should I do? Let's move the middle one out of the way. Right, I'm going to go up and down and in between the beads, I think. Looks quite effective without being too difficult. There we go. I must be having a lazy day today. And down and find a hole where I can stick it in. Yeah. That'll do. Boots. Yeah, do the same on the other side. Up. And in between and back down. You could do all sorts here. You could go up to the top, you could make curls at the bottom, you could just tuck them in at the back and not have them at all. This is the bit where your personality comes through. But there we go, that's okie dokie. Now middle is off centre, so I'll just give it a pull. There we go. Now I'm going to make this into a little curl. So I'm just going to twist it round, finger against it, you know that makes a flat curl. So I've gone around 2 or 3 times just to put something in the middle. Right, so finish these ends off, trim some of the length off. Always easier to fight with less wire than more. And find a hole to thread it through. And I have one down there. That's it. Bring it up tight. Close it down. Trim off the excess again. And then press down that little sharp bit. Okie dokie. Same on the other side. Trim off the excess length. And then find somewhere I can put it. It's a bit tighter on this side. Can I get some room there? No, I don't think I can. Yeah, I can get between the top of the bead around the outer wire in there. So that will do. Really, anywhere you can put the wire is fine. it's just a case of you don't want sharp edges, you don't want bits that could catch, so it's just a case of tucking them in. Now I'll smooth that one round with my pliers all the way down. Right then, yeah, those sharpy bits. And let's just finish this central wire off now. So again, I'm going to find somewhere to wrap it in, and it'll just go through one of those loops there. Now pull that. Don't get too giddy though, because I don't want to pull the curl out. So if I feed it through rather than dragging it through, you're less likely to distort the shape you've made with the rest of the wire. So it's more a case of easing it through. That's it. And trimming that off. Bend that over and down and flatten it in. Now remember, the size of this is entirely up to you. You could make this big enough to be a collar. You know, you could use something really quite large. That's the one that I did out of 1mm, and as you can see, I wrapped the wire, instead of just tucking it in, I wrapped it around each of the beads to make it a little bit bigger. But it's the same thing. The extra weight is just because of the gauge of the wire. This one's finer and the other one's thicker. So there it was before I attacked it and oxidised it, which of course I did, because you know what I'm like. And I think they're lovely. But I can't wait to see yours, and I'm hoping for some really big ones. Thank you very much for watching. Happy wrapping.